Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I am the host, as always. Joining me is my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
Doing well. I had lunch with Arjun, who everyone knows, and the Blobfish Man. If you don't know who he is,
There you
go on social media. He's like John Wick, but like it's Tua fans that he goes after, and Dolphins fans, and they're just the crazy ones. Not like all Dolphins fans. I'm sure some of you are actually cool and intelligent, but those of you that are a bit, different on social media, the Blob Man is here. He's the Baba Yaga against Dolphins fans that are a bit extreme.
Yeah, he loves going after Dolphin fans or Justin Herbert haters in general.
Mm-hmm.
He's great with data, similar to Arjun. If you ask him a question about analytics, he'll answer it right away.
Mm-hmm.
I've picked his brain several different ways. Whether it's like a run defense thing, okay, can you remove this part? Remove this, you put in this qualifier, and he's always just right spot on with it. So he's a fantastic follow. I don't know if he's listening to this, but he's great. He helps make Chargers social media smarter and makes Dolphins Twitter look dumber. So shout out to the Blah Man. I'm glad you guys had a chance to go. Where did you guys go eat?
I'm going to pronounce it terribly. I think it's Acapulco in Costa Mesa. It's like a Mexican restaurant. I've never been to it before.
Nice.
We had like the buffet, so we just had tacos and stuff like that. So it was good.
Very cool. Very cool. Speaking of food, Alex and I and Tyler were going to be in El Segundo for training camp for Back Together weekend. So people in the comments or tweet me, DM me, whatever. Let me know if you're in the area and you have any food recommendations for the weekend. So Alex and I are going to be staying in the same hotel from Friday to Monday. And then Tyler's going to be joining us on Monday. So if you have any food recommendations in El Segundo, Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, Redondo Beach, like that kind of general area, hit me up and let me know. All right, today we are going to do our part 2 from yesterday's show. We got some good positive feedback from that conversation, and hopefully you guys enjoyed today's show. So today's show is about the defensive roster bubble, and as Tyler has put in the title, aka Tom Telesco's former picks. Are any of them safe? Who's on the bubble? Who's not? Should be a fun conversation today. Yesterday we started with a really interesting position, which was tight end. I think we can start today with a very straightforward position, in my opinion, at least in terms of who is making the roster, and that's the edge rusher ones. I figured let's get the easy one out of the way. Cool. The roster locks obviously are Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Tuli, Tuipulotu, and Bud Dupree. Tyler, for you, would you even classify Chris Rumph as like on the bubble, or is he firmly like not making the roster because you have 4 studs in front of him?
Yeah, that one's really tricky. So it really just depends on how many they carry. If it's 4, he's not making the roster. There's no question about that. If they'd like to keep 5, then he's the obvious choice. So I'm going to consider him off. Like if I do roster projections today, I'm not including him.
Yeah.
And maybe some other position will pick up, the spot that he gives up. So yeah, I think he's not technically completely off the roster, but he's not breaking anywhere past 4, obviously.
Yeah.
And so it really just comes down to how many they keep. So to me, there's 4 locks, and then everyone else is not making it unless they decide to keep 5 or somebody gets hurt.
Yeah, I think the special teams was a key thing yesterday. It will be a key thing in roster construction, from now until forever. It's football. You got to play special teams. Ryan Ficken obviously has a job to do. So I guess there is a chance that Chris Rumph and his special teams ability is something that could weigh into his ability to make the roster. Bud Dupree's not playing special teams. Khalil Mack's not playing special teams. Joey Bosa's not playing special teams. Tuli played on every single special teams unit last year, even after Joey Bosa got injured. I would like to see that role reduced a bit. I don't need to see my guy being on the punt team and punt return and all that stuff. So maybe that is a way that Chris Rumph can make the roster, but certainly his role as a pass rusher, like there's going to be no snaps for him. Like it's just going to be so tough. Most teams that have a 4 edge rush room on their roster, your 4th guy is somebody who you give like 10 snaps to, like maybe on a good day. here your fourth guy is Bud Dupree, who had 8 sacks last season and 5 sacks before that, and is going to be a key rotation piece for them. So there's no snaps for any edge rusher outside of the top 4. I can't wait to watch this unit in training camp. Like, we deliberately decided to go to the first day of pads, and I think part of that is just so we can watch like the edge rushers versus Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt and all these offensive tackles. It's gonna be so much fun. I can't wait to see what Jesse Minter does with this group. But yeah, roster construction, very cut and dry. The 4 studs are the 4 locks, and everybody else, unfortunately, is not making it.
Yeah, the only thing I could see, they obviously signed Bud Dupree as a very expensive insurance policy, which means they are considering and projecting some missing games and some missing time, I think, for at least Joey Bosa and maybe even Khalil Mack at his age. So if they're already projecting that, it's possible to go, hey, let's just continue with the insurance idea and keep Chris Rumph around, or Justin Hollins for that matter, who I might even prefer over Chris Rumph, to be completely honest. So I could see that again, but no, I think it's 4 locks and nobody else for now.
Yeah, for now. Other edge rushers that are on the roster, the Chargers did bring back Andrew Farmer as well as Ty Shelby on futures contracts. And then they have Chris Collins, who they signed as an undrafted free agent, as well as Savion Jackson, and then Tremont Morris Brash, who we mentioned a bit after they signed him. He's kind of like a linebacker edge hybrid type of player. So the Chargers are, I think, rolling out a lot of different edge rushers in the preseason. I think some of that is maybe an indication that the 3 veterans at least are not going to be playing all that much. But it is going to be interesting to see. There's always a kind of a preseason pass rush star, and maybe that is Chris Rumph again. Maybe that's Ty Shelby. So we'll kind of see what happens there. I think it is an interesting group of players, but obviously those guys are shooting for the practice squad at this point.
Yeah, I'm curious what direction they go, because now we're reversing out of Brandon Staley's kind of defense. Do you look for someone who's a bit heavier? That would not that Hollins and Shelby are heavy, but they're at least like 250. I don't know if Chris Rumph officially got there or not. I don't believe Jackson is there. I believe he's a bit on the lighter side. So they may favor somewhat of a bigger body. To be completely honest, the way Shelby played in college, he was more of as a defensive end type. So maybe they jump into that a bit, but so maybe they would prefer that. And if I'm not mistaken, Shelby did finish on the roster last year, week 18, and played like 10 snaps. Yeah. So technically he is on the same deal. It's like a 1 game and then 1 year deal from last year. So I don't know if that means anything, that he's like is part of the roster. I don't know. I'm just trying to project anything here. But Shelby's like 249. I think Collins is like 250. High RAS as a linebacker. I ran it this morning, but then it's like, oh yeah, it's switch it to edge rusher, and it's a little bit of a different story. Also, was it Shelby or Hollins? One of them has the same RAS profile as like Chris Braswell from Alabama. That might have been Shelby.
That probably is more Shelby. So the heaviest of that group is Savion Jackson. For what it's worth, he weighs 290.
Really?
Yeah, he's 290.
Oh, Jackson.
Yeah, Savion Jackson. He's listed as an outside linebacker on the roster, but at 290, like that's really like defensive tackle, right? Like that's heavier than Morgan Fox is. So I think he's more of like your 3-tech, 5-tech type of player. So Chris Collins weighs 255. Again, this is on the Chargers roster. It could change, obviously. Andrew Farmer is 250. Ty Shelby is 249, and then Chris Rumph is 244. So Tremont Morris Brash is 245. Let's look at the defensive lineman. Any of them? No. Okay. Yeah, that's the edge rush room. So I am very curious to see what Andrew Farmer can do in the preseason. I feel like his run defense was really solid last year. If the Chargers do have like an injury, I would peg Andrew Farmer as maybe like my dark horse pick to supplant Chris Rumph. I think Farmer and his power profile, most would replicate what the Chargers have in all four of their starting edge rushers are very powerful players. So I think Andrew Farmer could be a sneaky pick if something happens to the big four and maybe replicate what they have in terms of a stylistic approach to the edge rusher position.
Yeah, I believe the last 3, there was one game where we only played 3 special team snaps, but I think there was 3 of the last 4 games to end the season. Farmer played the most special team snaps as an edge rusher too. So that might give him an edge as well. I know that's why they preferred him initially, because they thought he could play more special teams, which will be a big theme of defense today. I'm trying to see how much he actually played overall, because it's not like he was active every game. So he only played 47 snaps, but I think the last few games he played 14 or so.
Yeah. Looks like so Eddie's putting Eddie Saldana, who's always in the chat. Appreciate Eddie. He is putting some of his predictions in the chat, and we'll get to some of ours here in a minute there. And then we got the Chargers chat boys in the chat. No pun intended, I guess there. What's up, fellas? Hopefully you guys go into training camp. If you are, hopefully looking to meet up with you again. So Chargers chat doing some great things over there. Strongly encourage you guys to check them out. All right, Tyler. So I started with the edge rusher room. Where do you want to go next here?
Let's do another layup, and we'll get to the harder stuff later. Let's go linebacker, which I think is pretty locked in with Perryman, Colson, Dye, Neiman, and Henley. I don't see any reason to cut any of those guys. I know Henley may not be LB3 or 2, but you don't cut him. So I think those 5 stay, and that's kind of it. There was no other linebacker added outside of that group that I think would challenge for a roster spot. They go with those 5. I think they're cool with that.
Yeah, I think that feels fair too. I think they don't necessarily have a true LB1, just to start the season. I think we all believe that Junior Colson will become that player. But I think the complementary pieces that they have in this room, I think will shine bright. I think I really enjoy the different skill sets. You have Denzel Perryman, who's a great run defender, maybe not great at this point, above average to potentially great run defender. You have him as a blitzer. You have Junior Colson, who I think will be able to defend the run at a high level. And then you have special teams coverage guys with Nick Neiman and Troy Dye. We'll see what happens with Deion Henley. So I do feel like this room will be able to overachieve more compared to what the national picture is. But yeah, I'm a little skeptical of it, but I'm excited to see how it pans out. And I do more than 5, I think would just be kind of redundant. It's not like they have, Eben Ogbonnia, he was a fantastic special teams player. That kind of role is not on the roster right now. And you don't really need it with Henley, Neiman, and Dye all playing special teams at a really high level. So I do tend to agree that it's just the 5 that we all think it's going to be.
Did you watch Jean Baptiste?
I did. I would say he's comparable to Eamon as an overall prospect, but I don't know much about like his special teams play, but you know, I think he's more of a run defender than coverage, more of a blitzer than pass coverage. So he is pretty similar just like to Amen overall for what we've been used to recently.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That was easy.
Yeah, those are the easy ones. Cornerback, maybe a little easy as well. So, you know, again, interesting to see how this position pans out. But obviously you have Asante Samuel Jr., Christian Fulton, who are kind of heading into the season as your two starters. Jasir Taylor and Tarheeb still will challenge for the slot position. So those four are obviously locks. They just drafted Cam Hart. I would classify him as a lock. I'm classifying Dean Leonard as a lock. I really am excited to see Dean's development this season, because if you go back and I went back and watched the Lions game, not because of him, but he played really fantastic in that Lions game. He had another start after that against the Bears, or was that the Ravens game?
Ravens.
I thought he played really well against the Ravens as well. Yeah. And then unfortunately he got injured. Then we went back to the little Michael Davis thing. So I'm excited to see what Dean Leonard can do this season. And I think this particular environment, I think, suits his skill set a little bit more, you know, with less zone, more man coverage, I assume. But yeah, I would say that those 6 are locks. Anybody else you think is kind of in this conversation, Tyler?
Nope. Unless you classify like a Thomas Harper as a slot corner, then otherwise, no. I think it's those 6, and that's it. Dean Leonard is definitely a lock. I am very excited to watch him. I would love for him even to get some run with the first team and see if he can push Fulton.
Yeah, I would like that as well. Other cornerbacks that are on the roster, Chris Wilcox, former undrafted free agent from BYU, Matt Hankins, former undrafted free agent from Iowa, and then their current undrafted free agent, Zamari Walton, from Ole Miss as well, and then Robert Kennedy, the undrafted free agent from Indiana, right?
Ooh, that I do not know off the top of my head, but
or is that Rutgers?
I will stall.
I think it might be Rutgers. I'm pretty sure it's a red school.
I don't know. NC State.
NC State. All right. Different red school, different conference. My apologies for the Rutgers disrespect, Alex, if you're listening. So of that group, Tyler, is there one that you might be kind of curious to see what they can do at training camp and maybe carve out practice squad priority kind of role or challenge somebody unexpectedly?
Am I excited to watch them? Absolutely. Do I think any of them challenge? No, I don't. So I mean, you never know. AJ Finley last year was a huge surprise.
Yeah.
So you never know, but I don't think anyone's going to really push for a spot.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Most teams keep 6 corners. Some keep 5. 7 corners would be a bit of a stretch. So I think these other guys are all on the bubble. They do have Thomas Harper listed as a safety, which again, I've stated before, I think he has really fantastic slot tape. I think that's where he's best suited. We'll see what happens there, but he would be my choice of undrafted free agents that I think could have the biggest chance of carving out a role.
Definitely.
All right, Tyler, do you want to do safety or defensive line next?
Let's go with safety.
Okay. All right. So obviously you have Derwin James and Alohi Gilman as locks to make the roster. Jim Harbaugh believes they are the best safety duo in the league. And I certainly think that Alohi Gilman is one of the most underrated players in the league. After that, you have Tony Jefferson, who they just signed out of retirement. You have JT Woods, who has barely played in the NFL, has had several different hiccups with injuries and health and development as well. You have the aforementioned AJ Finley, who's a fantastic special teams player and filled in rather nicely down the stretch. And then you have the undrafted free agent duo of Akeem Dent and Jalen Phillips. You also have Thomas Harper in here if you classify him as a safety as well. So all of those players are on the bubble to me, and this is like the position where I have no idea what's going to happen. It's just like this is definitely the one that is going to depend 100% on training camp, on the preseason. Yeah. And we'll kind of see what happens when we get pads on and stuff like that.
What a grouping. This was a very difficult one. So yes, there are 2 locks, and I could easily pitch why other guys could be a lock, but there are 2 locks. I mean, I actually think that AJ Finley's the next safest. Sorry for the car racing outside my house, apparently. I think AJ Finley is the next safest because of the special teams play. If JT Woods were any bit able to play special teams with Ryan Ficken over the course of 2 seasons, then okay, it's probably JT Woods. Because Finley was kind of their ace those last 12 games, and the guy playing 16 special team snaps per game, I think he's got like the lead there. With Tony Jefferson, I am worried that he's being overhyped by some to almost like set up to fail. And I don't mean any disrespect like towards him or his abilities or knowledge and what he's done in the league. But like, let me just set this up this way. If you don't know me, or if you do know me, great. I have a bachelor's degree in cell and developmental biology. I did a year of stem cell research between that and my master's degree. And I've gotten engaged. I got married. I moved. What else did I got a dog? COVID happened. These are all things that happened at least a year after the last time Tony Jefferson played a full season in the NFL. Like, just for context, I've all those things happened after Tony Jefferson last played a full season. Now he's played up until 2022, but it's 94 snaps, 100 snaps, And listen, maybe that's all he needs to contribute. It's not like he needs to go out there and be a starter, knock on wood. Hopefully he's not playing a ton of snaps, but we just need to make sure our expectations are there because last year he was a scouting intern. So what I'm trying to say is I don't believe he's a roster lock like some people might say in the comments.
Yeah.
Because of like, oh my gosh, he's like a veteran safety. Great. I'm not really so sure. They got to see, like he had to try out at minicamp. So we'll see. I could walk the conspiracy theory that because they literally did nothing at safety until Tony Jefferson, that JT Woods would be safe because they're like, okay, cool. We'll work with that. That'll be the third safety. We'll call it good. But I can't do it. He just has not played enough and he doesn't play special teams. So whereas like Nick Neiman, who he's even seen plenty of games.
Yeah.
He's a special teams ace. He's like one of their best special teams players. So easy, no problem. Project him, making the roster. JT Woods ain't playing special teams. So it's a very tricky one. I don't know that a UDFA officially has the leg up on any of these guys yet, just because they're like newer regime guys, I guess, as UDFAs. But
yeah,
of course, like we talked about this. I think Dent was your number one, and my number one, I believe, and then Phillips. Yeah. I think that's the best shot to make the roster. So we'll see. This is a tricky one. I'll just say it now. I think it's okay. The two starters for sure. Finley, I think, is the third. And I think they just come down to one more guy between Woods and Jefferson, unless they want to keep more defensive backs. But that would bring the DB room to 10. So I think it'll just be Jefferson, man.
Yeah, lots to unpack there. So if you didn't pick up on what Tyler was throwing down, 2018 was the last time Tony Jefferson played a full season. There's been some injuries. He's been, stuck in some poor rotations. He played for the Giants for a bit. He played with the 49ers for a bit, back with the Baltimore Ravens. I think at his best, Tony Jefferson was a really high quality NFL starter, but you're talking about a guy who was out of football, as Kevin Kernick points out in the chat. He's going to play in the preseason. He's going to be the oldest player playing in the preseason. That is for sure. Because he just needs to. He needs to get his legs back under him. Can he be a reliable safety depth piece? Sure. We've kind of had this conversation. If they were going to go sign a veteran safety, I would have just preferred like Quandre Diggs or somebody who's played more recently. So 2018, man, like I was still living in Utah in 2018.
I didn't even know you.
Yeah, we barely knew each other. I was writing for Bolt Beat. You were writing for Bolt Beat. Alex was writing for Bolt Beat. That's how we kind of all got connected. This podcast did not exist since that point. So it's been a minute since Tony Jefferson has played a full season. And that's not to rag on him. It's just kind of the reality of his situation.
Yes.
I reached out to a Giants podcaster I really trust about Tony and his season in New York. And it was just kind of like, yeah, they just kind of got screwed. They had a bunch of injuries and they need somebody just to come in and like not shit the bed, basically. And that's fine if that's like your safety 5 or 6. I have questions if that's your safety 3. And this is a position group that I still think they could go out and sign somebody else, or, at the trade deadline, they could go be aggressive at the trade deadline and acquire a safety. So I have been thinking about this, and I'm kind of leaning towards putting AJ Finley as a lock. Like, I think his safety play is probably better suited for safety 4, but of the 3 guys on the main bubble, I trust AJ Finley the most to go play right now. Like, if the Chargers had a football game tomorrow, AJ Finley is safety 3 in my opinion. So I'm kind of leaning towards putting him as a lock, but he really shouldn't be. Like I trust him the most, but he's a guy who should be safety 4. So it's a tough room to dice through. This is a regime that really believes they can develop defensive back play. If you listen to the defensive line coach, Mike Elton, I think his name is, he said he's loved working with Jesse Minter because Jesse Minter is a great defensive back mind, and he sees everything from that lens. They really believe in their ability to coach that group up. And this is going to be the big test. The Ravens do this all the time. Like, if you look at the Ravens defensive roster, it's full of this kind of same thing. Like, their cornerback room for years has been Marlon Humphrey, who's awesome, and then a bunch of like street free agents and late round draft picks, and they make it work. And if that's what the Chargers are getting themselves into, fantastic. But right now, this is the position group for me that I have the toughest time like wrapping my arms around and predicting being like a good room. And they have a great safety duo. It's just like Alohi Gilman missed 6 games last year. Derwin has had some injury issues.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are gonna play. It's just a matter of this group being able to get the most out of them. And so I think everybody outside of Derwin and Alohi is on the bubble. And I think any of these spots are up for grabs. Akeem Dent, if you want to come get one of these spots, great. Jalen Phillips, if you want to come get one of these spots, great. And I think they'll just let everybody else kind of duke it out.
Yeah. Okay, so let's lock in AJ Finley as the third guy. It actually kind of reminds me of Raheem Lane last year.
Yeah.
Where we thought he wouldn't really be safety 3, but he was a lock because he plays so much special teams. And so if that's Finley this year and Lane's not on the roster, then I think he's considered a lock. So let's go with those 3, even though we don't think he's really he could be safety 3, but he might not have to be safety 3, but he will be the third most likely safety.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. I think that's a fair change. Okay. Safety room, man. It's going to be a super interesting battle to see what they prioritize. Lots of different skill sets. Who can play special teams? Who can't? Who can cover? I forget if it was Minter or if it was the secondary coach, but one of them did mention, it might have been the secondary coach. One of them did say that these safeties have to play multiple spots. Like you have to be able to play deep, strong, in the box, in the slot. And I just don't know like who has the most versatility there. I think that is potentially
Sorry. I'm holding on to Briars.
Yeah, your guy for sure. So maybe that's a feather in his cap, that versatility could shine through for one Jalen Phillips.
Yeah.
All right, before we get to the defensive line, of course, I have to tell you guys about our friends over at Prize Picks. It is the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. The Indiana Fever and Las Vegas Aces are about to tip off right now. Caitlin Clark is one of the easiest ways to win money on Prize Picks because she always hits her line for assists. You obviously have Asia Wilson, who's potentially the best player in the WNBA. You've been able to use Prize Picks for the Copa America, and unfortunately, the USA team is an embarrassment. But hey, man, Prize Picks can hook you up there for sure. We'll get back to some football picks here in a few weeks. Preseason games are right around the corner, so make sure and use prizepicks.com/guilty for your deposit match up to $100. Again, that is prizepicks.com/guilty.
Yeah, I haven't looked for a while at the NFL season stuff. Do they have any Herbert stats up yet or not yet? Because they had some Josh Allen, some Mahomes. I was hoping they'd have some Herbert stuff up yet.
I think they're adding more and more slowly here to the Prize Pick stuff.
Here's what I did, though, for those who don't know. I hit the more on every Chiefs and Bills player I could find. I don't win these things, so I just hit the more on all of them. So if you'd like to use our code, go to Prize Picks and use your awful reverse jinx that half of you have to help the Chargers this year. Go for it, man.
There you go. Love to see it. Before we get to the defensive line as well, we had a super chat earlier from Matt Waters. He says, don't sleep on the corner from Iowa. He's a gamer and very well coached. They're coached to play special teams. Example, Nick Neiman. I assume that's Hankins, the corner.
Matt Hankins?
Yep.
Yes. But he is from...
I was a little surprised they decided to keep him back on a futures contract, but yeah.
He's the former Falcons player?
Yeah.
Or is that Hawkins? Okay. No.
Both were former Falcons players.
Oh, okay. There you go.
All right. Let's get to the other confusing position, which is defensive tackle here. You can classify Morgan Fox, Puna Ford, and Justin Eboigbe as locks for sure. Outside of that, I think is some debate there. And Tyler, you posted a poll today featuring two of the defensive linemen, Otito Ogbonnia and Scott Matlock. So outside of Fox, Ford, and Eboigbe, who's a lock? Who's on the fence for you? And where do you want to kind of start this conversation?
Okay, so I kind of want to, as bad as I feel about this, quote unquote, eliminate Gerard Clark and CJ Okoye here, who I think can develop, but I feel they might go with some other guys who are also just draft picks as is, or they're familiar with them. So I think the final, two spots come down to Matlock, Ogbonia, and Hinton. Hinton specifically because of the familiarity, and people could argue that he just flat out has played better. So maybe him, and a bit more senior, I guess, than the other two. I think Matlock, because of Jim Harbaugh's shout out, now becomes like half of a lock as one of the leaders of this team. I don't think you just casually say someone's the leader of the team and then just flat out cut them. And I think they would like his upside. This is a late round pick, flashed a bit. So maybe they want to, explore that more. But to me, if I had to go with the next two to round out this group and make it 5, I think it's Scott Matlock and Otito Ogbonnia, in particular because, one, I think Ogbonnia is pretty solid and has shown that even post-injury. And 2, he's the only other guy that weighs anything over 300 pounds on this team. And they're going to need that. If Poona Ford, I don't think people understand that Poona Ford's maybe one of the 5 most important players on the team this year, which sounds insane, but he is the fulcrum at which a lot of this defense operates. If he goes down, this defense is potentially in for trouble. So I think they have to have Ogbonnia stick around just because of the size, and there's talent there too. So to me, it's Fox, Ford, Ogbonnia as locks, and then Matlock and Ogbonnia with I don't know who I give the edge to and who's more of a lock, but I think Ogbonnia is very difficult to cut at this point given his draft status, his play that we've seen, and his size.
Yeah, so I think it's all about how you think you can construct this roster, and do you keep 6 defensive linemen like they have in the past? Do you keep the 5? I happen to think they'll keep 5, but we'll kind of see what happens there. So obviously, I think Scott Matlock's best outcome is Morgan Fox. If we're talking about best career outcomes, that's the kind of archetype that you're looking at. Justin Eboigbe, I think, is kind of your hybrid of the group who can play potentially all across the line, but Poona Ford is your nose tackle, and so you need a backup nose tackle. So Christopher Hinton on the Chargers website weighs 310 pounds, and I think he could play nose tackle in a pinch. But to me, the backup nose tackle is Otito Ogbonnia, unquestionably so. That is his best position. It's his best role. So I happen to think that he's at least leaning towards a lock. He might not be 100% a lock, but I think that of the backups, I think Otito is the safest of the 3, because I think, Scott Matlock, you can kind of replace his role a bit with Justin Eboigbe. Christopher Hinton can defend the run at a really high level, in my opinion. There's the familiarity that you mentioned. So it is going to be interesting to see how those 3 pan out. But I think Otito is the safest of that trio.
Yeah, because he didn't have another injury to close out the season, did he? He just recovered from the one.
No, he recovered. Well, the numbers were not necessarily great in terms of run stops and run stop percentages, but his run defense grades were at the end of the season were about what they were prior to the injury. Now he's another season away from the injury. He's looked great on social media. I really believe in his ability to defend the run. So I think that his strength and his size, it's just needed. It is. And I think you have a much more difficult time constructing this run defense if you go smaller and if you go with Christopher Hinton or if you go with one of the other guys. So I think that for that reason, I would classify Otito as pretty close to safe.
Yeah. Especially if they've discussed this and shown this, if they want to bring in the different edge rushers like Dupree or Thule and they're reduced inside, you don't need as much maybe the pass rusher type. You just want a big plugger type to round out your roster, because you can always rotate a guy in instead of putting Scott Matlock out there, for example. Whereas you can't have, go for it, I guess, but you can't have Khalil Mack playing nose tackle.
Sure.
He could do it.
As Kevin points out regarding CJ Okoye, he does have a free spot on the practice squad. So I agree with this. There's no need to rush him. I'm very curious to see what year 2 looks like. Again, this is a guy who's played organized football for a year and a half. So this is a guy who definitely has the size, definitely has the physical profile. But if you really go back and watch the preseason, it was a lot of gimme run stops that people got excited about. And I think just like pad level and ability to use your arms the right way is it's a learning curve. He's never played defensive line outside of the preseason last year. So be patient with him. I think be patient with Gerard Clark as well, who just he's got to get physically ready for the NFL, I think is the biggest thing that I've heard. So those two guys will play a lot in the preseason. They'll play the bulk of the second half snaps as they did last season. And we'll kind of see what happens there. But to me, this debate will really come down to Scott Matlock and Christopher Hinton.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that.
But man, I went on the franchise guy, Marcus Whitman. I went on his thing, and that was like his big hang up on defense. He actually trusted the safety room a lot more than the defensive tackle room, and he trusted the cornerback room more than the defensive tackle room. So the outsiders are really concerned about the defensive tackle room. Jim Harbaugh is not. Jim Harbaugh feels very confident in this room, but I think there definitely are some question marks of how everything will kind of fit together.
I mean, I guess at least the safety room it is spearheaded by a superstar and a very good safety in Gilman. So at least like there's some heavily weightedness there. Yeah. The defensive line room, it's not in a league full of teams that have two of these guys. Teams are loading up at these guys. The Chargers really don't even have one potentially, at least not one like superstar type. So it's a difficult room. They clearly, to put it lightly, like neglected the room in the draft for the most part. Like there's no like early guy that I think you and I like tried to find a guy in the first 3 rounds, but like how do you pass up Junior Colson in round 3? So they just kind of paid the price the rest of the way trying to find a guy. But yeah, next year has to basically be defense. I think I saw you commented on like an ESPN post that they went receiver. Yeah, which I think is kind of a misread of how the team allocates resources to position groups. But also, the one thing I'll say about Staley, I guess, and the only thing I can really feel bad for is they didn't draft defensive guys. They went lineman, receiver in the first round. The Chargers need these cornerstones. You can't have Jesse Minter go into year 2 with even fewer guys. I mean, granted, they have money next year, but you got to start allocating some resources because just looking at this defensive depth chart as a whole, it's not even really top heavy outside of edge rusher and safety, and it's really not even that deep. It's a rough group.
Yeah, if you look at the last few drafts in terms of like cornerstones on the roster that like Tyler's talking about, I mean, first 3 rounds you had offensive tackle, receiver, linebacker this year. Last year you had receiver, edge rusher, linebacker, which we'll see about Deion Henley. You were for that, you had a guard and then a safety who hasn't become anything. And then you had offensive tackle, corner, wide receiver. So it's basically like been double the amount of resources in the draft over the last few seasons poured into the offense. And that's why you see the kind of disparity of young guys. Like outside of Thule, there is no young player on defense that's like a cornerstone. Like it's just like Thule needs some help next year. So I love Colston Loveland, as Gabriel points out in the chat. There are definitely some other players on offense that I really like so far. I haven't studied a ton of them, but this next year's draft supposedly is a great defensive line draft, great edge rusher draft, great corner draft. The first round pick next year is probably got to be a defensive player. I'm not picky about which of the 3 positions, but you got to get some long-term cornerstones on defense going for this roster, I think, to really click because, you don't know what's going to be the case with Khalil Mack next year. He's a free agent, technically. Joey is under contract, but again, he's cuttable, very tradable. You don't have a cornerback on the roster that's like a high-end draft pick, outside of Derwin. So it's dicey in terms of future draft picks. I think you pretty much got to pencil in a defensive player next April.
Yeah. Going back to that franchise guy, I saw the comments about his ranking of the Chargers. I think it's low, but I kind of get it too. It's very easy for us as Chargers fans to, like, we know every player in their college and the 3 games they had really good stretches, and what Ryan Ficken said about him about after week 12. Other guys is, for outside guys, and maybe it's good to know that that's how the Chargers might be viewed this year. And it's a bit more, unless you have a narrative, I feel like it's a bit more objective, right or wrong. I feel like it's nice to hear that. Or terrible. I don't know. I don't know what kind of season we're going to get. I'm teetering on moving towards 9 wins instead of 10, like I said earlier, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll do another win prediction once we get closer to the season. Marcus, we've had a really good relationship with Marcus. He does a ton of homework. For those who don't subscribe to his channel or watch his channel or anything like that, he doesn't just like pull stuff out of his rabbit hat, if you will, like some of these other national media guys. Like he pours in about 50 hours into each deep dive to watch film, study, edit, research, all this stuff. So he really does like know his stuff. He doesn't know like the ins and outs of every little like what is being said, what's happening, but like he does his homework. And so do I think 25th was too low? Yeah, absolutely. I think the Herbert effect of that, the Harbaugh effect of it, the offensive line, the pass rush should carry more weight than 25th. But at the same time, like I think you're not talking about an elite team. Like every comment we get about that is like, oh, like they're going 13-4. I mean, maybe, but like that's kind of crazy to predict when the roster is like 7 players that are really, really good and established and a bunch of question marks after that.
Yeah.
I'm excited though. I'm much more excited for next year. Next year
I'm very
is
excited for next year.
Yeah, next year is going to be the big year, but we'll see what happens. I think again the schedule is very manageable. We have a lot of stuff to dive into there, but roster construction, very interesting storyline on defense. I think defense is much more up in the air overall than offense. I think offense is pretty cut and dry outside of like the backups. Like when it comes to defense, there's like 6 players who have their roles solidified. Everything else to me is like up for grabs. So it's just going to be very interesting to see how Jesse Minter maneuvers this. What exactly is he looking for? Which players obviously stand out, make plays. Tariq still at minicamp was making plays, so he's probably helped himself a bit. It's going to be very much dependent on competitions happening at training camp in the preseason and all that good stuff. And it should be a ton of fun to watch.
Or not. But
We'll
see. We watched the offensive line last year, and then once the starters were out, and that was a treat.
Yeah, that scrimmage, man. For those who were not at the scrimmage last year, they did the scrimmage without their technically 3 top offensive tackles. So it was just kind of a disaster. Like it was very difficult to play offense that day against Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, and Tuli Tuipulotu without Rashawn, Trey, Zach Bailey was out. Foster Sorrell was like playing. He was starting left tackle. And then what was his name with the long hair? I forget.
Shoot. It's not the guy from Delta State. Although he might have had long hair, but he was hurt by then. It was another guy. No, Storm wasn't there last year.
No, Storm was not there last year, but it was an undrafted free agent, and he was like OT6 on the roster, and he was starting with the first team unit in the scrimmage, and it was just like so bad. It was not Storm Norton. This was last season. Storm Norton was
or something. I forget what the defense had, but it was like Oprah. Like you get a sack, you get a sack. It was just
if in a game it would have been like 15 sacks probably.
You see the Jets game like that.
Yeah, but a little bit worse.
The worst. And
the Jets at least had Billy Turner in that
game. yeah, exactly.
It's okay. We've come a long way. We're good now. We trust the depth of it a bit more. All right, Tyler. Any final thoughts before we head out?
I'm just excited to get a little bit closer to camp. For those who follow us, we're not going to be live on Thursday, so have a great and safe 4th of July. Enjoy the day. Apparently, like the hot dog eating contest is terrible. So have a ball with whatever you do on 4th of July. Just do it responsibly.
Well, it's because they banned the champ. They banned the GOAT. He can't do it anymore.
Unreal.
Free my guy.
Unreal.
But yes, I love the 4th of July. I love barbecuing. I'm going to be on the Traeger duty this year at my in-laws, so it should be a ton of fun. I love, getting on that and swimming and fireworks, all that stuff. I love the 4th of July. Hopefully you guys have a great time as well. Watching The Sandlot is a tradition for us on the 4th of July. So If you haven't seen that movie recently, definitely encourage you to pop that on the tape and turn it on. All right, that's going to do it for us today. That's going to do it for us this week. As Tyler mentioned, we'll be back next week as we continue to ramp up towards training camp. Really excited to get down there. Like I mentioned earlier, send me those food recommendations on social media in the comments. Alex and I and Tyler will really appreciate that. All right, guys, have a good one. That's going to do it for us today. As always, bolt up.